Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second November Spotlight. So this is the second Spotlight in November that we do on Sundays. And time is flying. It's almost Thanksgiving time. It's flying like a bird. Okay. Hey, a lot of stuff is happening too. And by the way, in case you haven't noticed, the channeling community is really cranking up, and it's really interesting because, to be honest, a lot of the stuff coming out of the channeling is direct from what we call the bad ETs. And they're starting to pump out information about 2027 being the great year for disclosure, and that this is not a trap, this is not a prison, this is not a thing, and that you have to change your reality by envisioning positive things and don't think about anything negative, otherwise you will make the negative come about. And, that's crock of crap, folks. The issue is they want to keep you asleep. So the ETs that we work with, that's what we call the good ETs, we're looking for change soon. And, 2027, the bad ETs would love to have things pushed down the line until 2027. That sort of gets it past the crunch right now, the crunch time. And so that's sort of it's a good type of way to think about the bifurcation of, what the good ETs are trying to do and what the bad ETs are trying to postpone. But even if it got to 2027, they just kick it down the road a couple more years and a couple more years after that and so on like that. And when you hear them talking about this is not a trap, this is not a prison planet, this is not this is not that, just think good vibes, good vibes. Hey, folks, this is a real thing. The extraterrestrials are a real thing. You create your future, yes, by thinking about it, by having good thoughts, good vibrations, you envision it better, but then you have to do something. You have to see it clearly, and then you do something. There's the whole idea that you create your reality just by thinking and not doing is crazy. You have to do both. You have to both think about it, then you have to do something. If you sit, they have a saying in Africa, there are two types of people. The people who build the house, and the person who sits under a coconut tree and waits for his lunch to fall. I mean, you can envision a lunch to fall and all to be good, and maybe a coconut will fall on your head. But the actuality is, if you think of something, you have to see the world clearly. And if it's a trap, guaranteed the prison authorities are not going to tell you the truth. They're going to say, oh, just be calm. Think of good thoughts. If you think of anything negative, you're going to create that negative thing, and it will be terrible. So what you need to do is create a good things. This is not a trap. This is a wonderful place. And the world, the universe, the galaxy is filled with good and wonderful people that are all good and wonderful, and we're just waiting for you to wake up and be growing up a little bit more. They're not telling you you were thrown into a prison. They're not saying anything like that. They're saying, no, we're just waiting for you to evolve a little bit better so you can get to the next higher level of density, and then the next one, and then the next one, and you will graduate. Isn't that wonderful? It's a load of crap, folks. It's a total load of crap. This is a prison, and we are trying to get you out of it. And the first thing is to show you what it actually is, show you what's going on. So whenever you hear that crap that you hear coming out of the channeling community, know where it's coming from. Know where it's coming from. And whenever you hear anyone talk about the Greys, they're future humans, they ruined their own environment, and they're coming back in order for you to help grow a new species, and everything is voluntary. That's all lies. None of that is correct. So if you, and we have a whole program, we have a whole movie on the Greys, what actually happened. How would they actually start? How did they actually come about? They were a civilization that actually looked just like you and me. They looked a little different, but they were pretty close to us. A little bit more emotional, but they were pretty close to humanoid. They looked very humanoid, and they were conquered. They were invaded. They were conquered, and then they were taken, and the ETs know about ISBs, so they took the ISBs out of all those people and stuffed them into bodies that couldn't feel, because they needed beings that couldn't feel in order to get essentially slaves that would do horrific things to other species in order to help expand their section of the galaxy and so on like that. Grays are manufactured, and there are now a whole section of grays that we call the Essassani resistance movement that are trying to free all their brothers and sisters that are still enslaved by what we call the bad ETs. So, it's a war, folks. This is a war. Let's not make any if, ands, or buts about it. This is a war. So today we're going to be talking about the Middle East war. But understand, wars are real things. They're real things. And you can't just sort of say, think good thoughts, be nice, have good vibrations. There's a war. There's a war now. This is a prison. And there was a past war, and there will be a future war if we don't stop it right here and now on this planet. And one of the things we're going to be talking about, the major thing we're talking about today, is the Middle East war. And this is why we want to show you that you can use remote viewing to gather the information that helps explain the future. So this is about the Middle East war, but you should be translating that is, hey, if Farsight can tell us about the Middle East war, well, maybe they can tell us about the Galactic War. Then they can tell us about the war between the good ETs and the bad ETs. So, this is a lesson in progress. You learn one, and from that, you learn something else. Let's start. Let's start talking about steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's start with the Middle East war. And before we do that, let me say that the stuff we're going to be talking about today all came out of our deep news programs. So, the deep news stuff, everything is available on FarsightPrime.com with captions in 13 languages, and you can actually see all of that nicely organized, and the transcripts for all of that are ingestible by AI, so you can have them, you can download them and upload them to your AI and have the AIs talk to you about them. So you can watch the videos, and then you can also have the AIs talk to you about them. And really understand this. You can't get this at any university right now. You can't get anything like this at any university right now. Even the methodology remote viewing is not allowed. You cannot even talk about extraterrestrials or UFOs or UAPs on any university campus. Who do you think is doing that? Academics are supposed to be able to be talking about anything, teaching about all types of subjects. You can't talk about that subject. You think this is not a prison, that the information control system doesn't work? Then how could that possibly be? So what we're going to be talking about is something you're not getting on the mainstream news and something you're not getting on any type of university or educational system. You're not getting it anywhere, but you're getting it here. And let me tell you, don't be mistaken about this. Know for sure that military intelligence is not just in the United States, but others also watch what we talk about here. This is cutting edge even for them. So you're on the cutting edge right now when you do this stuff. So if you have not yet subscribed to FarsightPrime.com, you're missing out on a lot. We put everything on FarsightPrime.com. We try to have at least one remote viewing thing that we do come out on YouTube every month so people get an idea of what we're doing and also the methods that we're doing. And we're changing our display methods a lot. We were in the studio all day today doing stuff that you're going to be seeing very, very, very shortly. The innovations we're doing and showing you remote viewing stuff in ways that are unprecedented is amazing. The ideas originally came from Lynn Buchanan, who's on our board of directors. He's the big honcho in the CRV, Controlled Remote Viewing Community. And we finally got the technology and everything able to finally do what he suggested about 30 years ago. Lynn's a great guy. Okay, so let's talk about the Middle East. And remember also, if you have not signed up for our free email newsletter on our website, farsight.org, go to the top of the menu on the left and sign up for the free email newsletter. That's how we try to reach out to everybody. And if you're subscribing to us on our YouTube, remember to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. But fundamentally, email programs tend to put everything into the spam or promotions folder or updates folder. So, it's unclear how good the emails actually are, although if you check them once in a while, we never send out spam for anything. And we never give our email list out to anybody for any reason at all. However, the very best thing to do is to be subscribed to FarsightPrime.com and then to check it, because we have a carousel at the top of FarsightPrime.com that has the latest stuff that we've been doing, and we put out stuff every week, a couple things, 2 or 3 things a week, and for you to just go there and then see all the billions of all the things that we do, and then to see sort of the latest and the greatest on the carousel on the top, and it really helps. And always check our series in FarsightPrime.com. In the series row, you have the deep news stuff. You have the solos. You have the conversations with Harvey. Oh, by the way, people have been asking about what happened to the conversations with Harvey. Let me be honest with you folks. Nothing. We haven't been putting them out for a couple months. Not because they didn't happen. We have them, and the videos are there, but we're trying to change the video style, what we're doing to present it, to make it better. And we've just sort of gotten over the major hurdles of getting all the technology correct. But you're not going to miss out on anything. All those things, everything in the past is going to be released really soon. And the new stuff we have every month, that will be coming out as well. Okay. And now let's go on to the conversations on Spotlight with you and everybody else. Let's talk about the Middle East war. Now, let me be honest with you. We took 16 transcripts from 16 different deep news stuff dealing with the Middle East. And we said, well, it's sort of not quite that way. I said, I need an objective evaluation of these 16 transcripts to give us an idea of what they're actually saying. So I went to ChatGPT, and I had ChatGPT read all of these 16 transcripts and said, what are these telling you? Because the Middle East war is going to be kicking up again. I mean, I'm not talking about a little skirmish. It's going to be kicking up again. Let me explain what's going on. And then we wanted to say, well, what do our deep news stuff tell us about how it's ultimately going to be sorting out? Okay, so this is what's going on. It's already started, this initial phase, but it's going to get worse. The so-called peace agreement between Hamas and Israel, that was a sham to begin with. So what's going to be happening is Israel is going to be blasting the heck out of Gaza, and another attempt to squash down Hamas. Hamas, right after the peace agreement, started to remobilize and everything was building up again. Same thing with Hezbollah in northern Israel. Hezbollah has been rearming and rebuilding and everything, and it's growing like gangbusters. So Israel has a plan to attack Iran. It cannot attack Iran if Hamas and Hezbollah are fully armed and attacking Israel, because then it would mean Israel's attacking Iran to its east, but then to its west and north, you've got Hamas and Hezbollah attacking Israel. That's a 3-front war. So Israel knows the war with Iran is going to be an existential war. Each country, Iran and Israel, know that one of them is going down. And it's unclear to anybody which one's going down, but it's going to be a big thing. And Israel doesn't want to be caught up in fighting Hamas and Hezbollah while it's struggling with Iran, because that's going to be an existential type of threat, an existential type of war for both Iran and for Israel. Now, so Hamas and Hezbollah are going to be attacked by Israel. That's the first phase. And then there's going to be the thing with Iran. Now, Iran has thousands and thousands of missiles, and they're also developing and mass producing bunker-busting bombs that they can put on their missiles as well. And those are bombs that not just hit the surface, but they can go deep, and a lot of Israeli infrastructure is deep. And the Iron Dome of Israel simply will run out of ammunition, so it can't really defend itself against all of those bombs, those missiles coming over. Iran really changed the way warfare is, because Israel is designed to be a land power. That means they have tanks, they have armies, things like that, and they have an air force. Iran just said that's not the future. They went for missiles. They knew that they were going to be fighting things with missiles, and the missiles were more important than the tanks or the army or anything like that. So Iran has a ton of missiles, and Israel has some as well, but they mostly have an air force and an Iron Dome. Okay, so Israel, when they attack Iran, they often attack with jets that go and bomb Iran with the jets. Then Iran bombs Israel with the missiles, so that's how that goes. Okay, now Iran is rearming, obviously, and they're about 68% back to where they were with regard to their defenses, aerial defenses, with respect to where they were before the 12-day war, the last war. And Israel's not going to wait too long, because the longer they wait, the more those air defenses will be rebuilt and improved, and the more difficult the battles will actually be. So there's a time limit to how long they can wait. So with that understanding, you can expect that the Hamas and the Hezbollah attacks, those are going to happen first. And they're going to happen probably very soon, because Israel has to get that out of the way before it goes after Iran. Now, in this whole talk, I'm not siding with either side. So if you think I'm siding with Israel and things like that, you're nuts. If you think I'm siding with Iran, you're nuts. If you think I'm siding with any one side whatsoever, you're nuts. I'm not. I'm just describing what the war situation is on both sides. Israel wants to break up Iran very similarly to how Syria was broken up. Iran wants to get rid of Israel. So those are the two things. So Israel wants to basically get rid of Iran by breaking it up. And then Iran wants to literally, basically level. It wants to do to Israel what Israel did to Gaza, that type of thing. So both sides understand that that type of conflict is going to be a big one. It'll be an existential threat to both sides. All right, so let's actually talk about the stuff that we've got with remote viewing to tell us how this is going to turn out and what's going on inside the heads of the major leaders and things like that. It'll tell us a lot. Okay, so we have, and I'm going to be pulling things from all 16 of these. And at the very end, I'm going to be talking about the nuclear program of Iran. So make sure you hang on to the end, okay? Okay, all right. So let's first talk about the Iranian mindset, the leadership mindset, and what we can call the escalation arc. That early phase, the pressure, the incursion, the fury, everything like that. So first of all, we have the very early pressure. Now, the very early pressure we can think of as starting with the clerical leader, Ali Khamenei. He begins, and we're getting this out of the remote viewing deep news sessions initially from that Aziz had. Okay, and that was Ali Khamenei was experiencing fearful pressure. Now, this time period is from 2024 into the end of 2025 and beyond. So the actual time limits that we put on the targets are not like hard limits, where remote viewing doesn't go after numbers like a date. It goes after events that fill the intent of the target queue. And so when we have the dates, we're looking at the essence of the conflict that we're looking at. So we're talking from 2024, mid-2024 into 2025, at least to the end of 2025, but probably also into 2026. So the early pressure, way back, is from Ali Khamenei, the clerical leader. Fearful and pressured. That's some of the emotions he was getting. He was getting things like quicksand energy. That's how Aziz was perceiving it. Defensive, compelled towards a larger collective, but with very little personal control. He was concerned. He was really very concerned. Now, the president of Iran, Masoud Pizeskian, he sees this entire period as an opportunity. So that was very different from how Ali Khamenei was looking at it. He was Masoud Pizeskian, the president of Iran, he was very pragmatic, expansion-oriented, data-driven, and optimistic about leveraging the turmoil that was going to come out into something useful. Okay, now, after that sort of initial early mindset, you get the actual incursions, the stuff that started with the 12-day war and will continue soon. As the conflict deepened starting with the 12-day war, but you have to sort of blend the 12-day war into the new war that's coming as sort of one giant war thing. So as the conflict deepens, the clerical side, that would be Ali Khamenei, feels that the nation's space has been breached. His energy turns from anxiety into anger. And then he sees an external force infringing on what he considers sacred territory, waiting for larger allies to counterstrike. Okay, counterstrike. Meanwhile, on the civilian side, that would be Masoud Pizeskian, once ambitious, he becomes bogged down and frustrated with the bureaucracy, angry that the plans are stalling and there was inertia that was surrounding him. Okay, then after that, the next phase is rage and constriction. Now, this is all coming from the remote viewing data, okay? And all these sessions were conducted under totally blind conditions. The remote viewers knew nothing at all about the project or the nature of the target or that it had anything to do with the Middle East or Iran or Israel or anything like that. So this is really very clean, whistle-clean scientific stuff. And here I'm going to be drawing from Intisam's sessions, Kamaya's sessions, and Yeme's session, okay? Now, by the time of the overt incursion of Israel attacking Iran, the energy across both the leadership poles, that's Ali Khamenei and Masoud Pizeskian, hardens. There is secrecy. There is the idea of infiltration, deception, and riot-like violence appear in their mental field. Now, folks, these sessions were done way before the 12-day war. And that's exactly what happened. When Israel attacked Iran, they had operatives inside Iran that were killing off the major generals of Iran. All types of air defense stuff was taken out, all done in secrecy. There was incursion and infiltration. That was what was dominating the early parts of that 12-day war. And that is what both Ali Khamenei and Masoud Pizeskian were thinking. And we had it for you like way in advance. That's exactly what happened. And then there was a crescendo of righteous rage, betrayal, and constrained retaliation. And this is deep, folks. I mean, to actually have seen the actual war after looking at our sessions, meaning you looked at the sessions first, and then you saw the war, and if you're paying attention, it's like, holy mackerel, are you serious? They saw every one of these details correctly. All right, now, this is a psychological sequence. Defense, then violation, and then fury. And it matches the structural forecast that Israel's northern operations come first, followed by an Iranian ignition once national space is pierced. So, this is good, folks. We're doing this, I hate to boast, but we're doing this really well. All right, now, let's talk about the Israel-Hezbollah confrontation, because we focused on that as well. We found that there was advanced weapons being used and an aftermath pattern. There was a technological motif that came across with the Israeli-Hezbollah stuff, and it recurred across all of the remote viewers. So there were ultra-high energy detonations, blinding flashes, shockwaves, towering smoke columns, and urban craters reminiscent of nuclear or directed energy effects. Now, if you actually saw the last time that they really smashed southern Lebanon, and it actually went right into Beirut. That's what it looked like. It was they weren't messing around with firecrackers when they went in last time. It looked like that. And then the remote viewer said there was frequency and electromagnetic manipulation, and that's very much true. That's part of the Israeli warfare tactic, which is to screw up all communication stuff. Producing both surveillance and mind disruptive effects. Stuff that affects people's heads. Okay, now that kind of stuff was coming out of Aziz's session, Kamaya's session, and DMA's session. That's important, folks. These folks, they did their sessions independently of each other. They did not know the target. They didn't know the nature of the project, and they didn't communicate with each other about the projects at all when they did it, and they all came up with the same thing. Statistically, that is like crazy. That's like absolute. That's very, very important to see that there's this strong overlap between 3 or 4 or 5 completely independent sessions on these things. Okay. All right. The outcome, as far as the remote viewing is concerned, and it matched what we saw, is that Lebanon was left in ruins. Its cities emptied, landscapes scorched, infrastructure collapsed. Israel sustained local devastation, which is accurate. Some areas, especially near the border, were ghost town districts. That's exactly what happened. And infrastructure strain. That's exactly what happened, all in northern Israel. But its central systems endured. So Israel's central systems endured. They were okay. But there was a lot of disruption of the type exactly that was mentioned here, especially in northern Israel. And that kind of stuff came out both from Aziz's session on Hezbollah as well as Yemen's session on Hezbollah. So the Hezbollah front manifests as what you might call the opening act. A massive release of advanced energy weaponry that devastates Lebanon while Israel survives in a damaged but intact state. And this phase forms the bridge between regional conflict and the later Iranian fury. So you can expect that not to have occurred just before the 12-Day War, but you can expect that to occur very soon again. Now, the Iranian response to the Israeli and the U.S. attacks, this we might call phases of blowback and projection. Inside Israel, there was a social shock phase. Mind you, all this was gotten before any of the conflict started, okay? That's really what you need to understand. So inside Israel, there was a social shock phase, and that's exactly what happened. Crowded gatherings, they had huge demonstrations. I mean, huge. On a planetary scale, they were like, whoa. They became chaotic, and there was an apparent triggering impact. Perhaps symbolic or liberal, it turns order into panic. Israel was a completely different type of animal during that time. Military uniforms appeared amid smoke in the sessions, loud sounds and shouting. Scenes that first look ceremonial or political suddenly shift into unrest and fear. That came out of Intisam's and Aziz's session. Now, let's shift around the world and go to the United States. What was going on in the United States? Again, this is from the remote viewing sessions, and you'll notice that what happened in the remote viewing sessions exactly matched what happened inside, on the ground in these places when the things actually started. Well, inside the United States, the sessions say there was fast-moving objects detonating above an urban skyline. Now, this is really, really important that you listen to this, because a lot of this stuff comes out of Aziz's session, Intisam's session, and Shantae's session, all conducted independently. And a lot of this stuff looks like it's not yet happened. It looks like it's gonna happen. They saw a fast moving, because this whole war thing between Israel and Iran, you have to think of it as all grouped to one. Don't say, oh, it was just a 12-day war and then something else is another war. No, it's just a conflict, one giant conflict. The 12-day war and the after war, it's all one thing with a pause in the middle. That's really what we're talking about. It's just one war. Once the beginning part lasted for 12 days and the second part is going to happen. And it's all one thing with a pause in the middle. That's what we're dealing with. So what happens inside the United States during this overall conflict? Fast-moving objects detonate above an urban skyline. A spreading, dark particulate cloud follows, with heat, wind, and atmospheric turbulence scorching structures. Viewers note naval and heavy vehicle activity, communication blackouts, and a power down or shutdown of an entire region. Imagery of mushroom-shaped plumes. Now, we're not talking nuclear, but large explosions cause mushroom-shaped plumes. So imagery of mushroom-shaped plumes, ash-coated cities, and infrastructure collapse repeats across multiple independent sessions. How could this possibly be? So actually, just listen to me. During the Biden administration, they let in, no one knows how many, but the average, people are estimating 14 million people just walked in across the border. There was no vetting, no nothing. You'd be crazy if you thought that places like Iran and also Al-Qaeda and ISIS, others, didn't take advantage of that time period and send in operatives. And those operatives, I guarantee you, are still here. And they are quiet. What they do with operatives like that is they go to sleep. They blend in, they get money in, sent from abroad. They don't do anything to make themselves noticed. They just sort of are, that's why they're called sleeper cells. But they also brought in heavy weaponry, like missiles. Now, how can you do that? Because you need trucks and, 18-wheelers and things like that. Look at the huge quantity of drugs that come into the United States. Those things aren't coming in with kids with backpacks. You're talking heavy, major trailers, and that's they're bribing. And back in those days, they were bribing some of the border guards, getting whatever needs to be done to get those things in. They had tunnels going underneath the border, coming out inside buildings in the United States. A lot of that stuff just happened, and there's a huge money flow dealing with all those drugs. And you're nuts if you think that the United States government is all good and being everything, trying to stop all that stuff. There's a huge money flow. And one of the things that happens when you have a huge money flow is people get paid off at all different types, at all different levels, to let that stuff happen. There's no other way all those drugs could get into the United States. They're not coming into kids with backpacks. It's too much. Well, if you have those same trucks getting in, look, they drive into a big building on the Mexican border. They disappear. The truck disappears. It goes underneath the border deep and comes out in another building inside the United States. And then it drives out of the garage door. That's how they get these things in. And they bribe people all along the way. And they don't have any shortage of cash. They have billions, if not trillions of dollars to be able to spend on this. They'll bribe whatever they need to bribe in order to get it done. So really what you're talking about is heavy weapons in here, as well as operatives. Now, if Iran is faced with an existential threat where Israel wants to break it up, the only way you can do that is with American help. And Iran's going to be saying, look, what do we have to lose at this point? Because if Israel is trying to break up Iran, and the only way they can do that is with American help, Iran's going to be facing the moment where it says, is this the time to activate the sleeper cells? Because if you distract the United States with internal military conflict, with internal stuff, then they'll take their military and ship it back to the United States to worry about the stuff there, divide it, and then Iran has a better chance of dealing with Israel. So there's a reasonable chance that that's the way the Iranians are going to think. They're not going to say, this is a fair fight, and we're just going to be fighting the Israelis and the Americans just the way it is, man to man. They're not going to do that. They're going to say whatever they need to do. Now, they definitely would not activate the sleeper cells unless it was absolutely necessary. Just like Israel would never think of using an atomic bomb unless it looked like an existential threat that they were going to be eliminated. There are certain lines that you have to cross before they would do that. So Iran would only activate those sleeper cells if it was a no-win situation unless they activated the sleeper cells. And so that looks like that may be happening, and that would match what we see here in the remote viewing stuff. So the wars don't actually hit the United States. If you look at World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Iraq, the Desert Storm, the Iraq War, they all happen over there. They never happen here. You get wars all throughout Europe, all throughout Asia, conflicts going on in Africa all the time. That's one of the reasons that the Americans actually involve themselves with all those wars and can involve themselves, because it never affects the Americans. It never affects the continental United States because of the big oceans, Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Well, the Iranians know that. The Russians know that. The Chinese know that. Everybody knows that now. So that part of the strategy is any sort of big future confrontation with the United States, the enemies of the United States know they're going to have to do something that actually rattles the cage of domestic Americans within the continental United States. That's sort of in the equation now. All right, so let's look at the sort of bottom line synthesis of what we have so far. The first is that Lebanon bears the catastrophic destruction under advanced energetics. Israel withstands but remains operational. And then the leadership arc, early fear and opportunism evolve into rage and frustration as external incursions multiply, all inside Iran. And there's a whole bunch of sessions for all of these things. And then you get to the retaliation part. It reaches beyond the region. The heaviest consequences unfold not only in Israel, but also across the Atlantic. And that's the stuff we're expecting in the future. Aerial detonations, particulate fallout, infrastructure collapse, national trauma. Okay, so that's sort of the basic outline of the early phase of the Iranian and Israeli and American sort of conflict that's coming up. The real big questions are, of course, what is Russia and what is China going to do about it, and even North Korea? Are they going to get involved this time? We don't really know, but that's a big unknown in this entire drama. Okay, so let's look at some early indicators, things that we should be watching, looking for. The first thing to look for is escalation in the north. Unusual electromagnetic energetic effects during Israel's operations in Lebanon would signal that the first phase is unfolding. First phase of the second part of the war. The first 12-day war, that's over now, the continuation of the war. So the first phase of that will be the stuff in Lebanon. According to the remote viewing stuff, we're looking at electromagnetic effects and extreme energetics in southern Lebanon. And then there's going to be a shift in the Iranian tone. Public rhetoric will move from caution to moral outrage, referencing violations of sacred space, and a prelude to the retaliatory phase. Now, that retaliatory phase is important. All of our remote viewers picked up the sense of a retaliation. that, I think, is what's pointing to the stuff that may happen in the United States, in the continental United States. And then the next thing is Western infrastructure drills. The naval repositioning, and that's already happening. The huge amounts of the U.S. Navy is repositioning as we speak. Civil defense exercises or unexplained power grid simulations in the U.S. metros that will mirror the shutdown imagery. And, some of the stuff that's going on now with the closure of the airspaces in the United States, that's a good way to sort of prepare the population for this type of stuff, because you get the government shutdown that's going on right now, and the air traffic control people are not getting paid. They've got to pay their rent, so a lot of them are just doing other things to get money to buy food and stuff like that. Maybe driving Ubers or Lyfts or, DoorDash or whatever in order to get food, but they can't keep working. So because they're not getting paid, so the issue is that the shutdown that you're actually seeing, the government shutdown, is affecting air traffic, and a lot of, thousands and thousands of flights have been canceled, and some areas have been shut off for for traveling in the United States. And it looks like if the government shutdown continues much longer, you may have a huge shutdown of air traffic in the United States. So from the administration's point of view, that may not be a bad thing, because it prepares the population for that type of thing happening in case there's actual military responses inside the continental United States. Now, these are not date-driven specific forecasts. Remember, remote viewing doesn't work with dates. Dates are sort of general markers in the sand. Remote viewing works on events and the intention of the target queue. So what we're talking about here, these are sequential markers, like one thing happens first and then the next thing and then the next thing. And when the early ones appear, the later ones tend to follow. So that's really what we're looking for, and that's what this is how we're structuring these things. So we're expecting from all of our remote viewers a devastating northern war, leadership outrage leading into escalating and vengeance, and a retaliatory event that crosses the oceans. And again, the remote viewing timelines are elastic, but the order of the events is stable. And that order is now unfolding in real time, and we're watching it. That's why this spotlight is so important. I get to describe the order of these things. Now, let's dive into the nuclear side of things, okay? Now, we know that Israel has nuclear bombs, but let's talk about Iran. Iran has made a huge infrastructure. Now, Iran has not wanted to have a nuclear bomb in the past because they didn't want to go in the direction of a country that could be eliminated because of that. Having nuclear weapons can really cause things to sort of go south if they want to sort of integrate themselves with the rest of the world economically and stuff like that. But that changed with the 12-Day War. So in terms of the underground architecture, multi-level subterranean complexes. Now this is coming out of the remote viewing sessions done totally blind. They didn't know this had anything to do with Iran or anything. We saw multi-level subterranean complexes that stretch beneath arid mountains, connected by internal roadways and guarded entry points. And we're talking deep, folks. We're talking deep. And we're also talking big. If you look at these sessions, like from Aziz's sessions on the Iranian nuclear capabilities, and Intisam's session on Iranian nuclear capabilities, and Shantae has a session on that as well. These are big, folks. These are big facilities, like big facilities. They got like trains underneath there. I mean, it's big. Now, the facilities contain, and they were clearly described under totally blind conditions, they contained rows of vertical cylinders centrifuge-like hardware, and small vehicles hauling components across multiple underground lanes. I mean, it's uncanny when you look at that. If you Google nuclear centrifuges, those are used to purify the uranium till it finally gets into the 90% level. What they drew in their sessions exactly matches what such cylinders actually look like. So, across the sessions, the nuclear hardware is perceived as missile class. This is what the viewers said. Missile class cylindrical systems nearing completion, like 80 to 85% close to being fully completed. And Kamaya did a session also. Her session reframes this as an energy sphere. Dense, programmable, expanding, potentially self-sustaining once it's activating. And together, all these sessions point to a hybrid technology, both traditional nuclear and advanced energy in concept. That's what these remote viewing sessions say. All right. So let's look at a paradox to sort of see how this all completes. The viewers were perceiving what we might call stalled completion of all this nuclear stuff. The technical program was held at about 60 to 80%, while off-site equivalents may exist in full readiness. So, in symbolic terms, Iran's nuclear hand is basically complete, but still very concealed. Okay, now let's talk about the leadership, because how do the leaders feel about this? In the past, they always wanted to hold off on actually deploying nuclear weapons, but how do they feel? Well, going into Ali Khamenei, the religious cleric who's the supreme religious leader of Iran, going into his head, all three viewers described him as fatigued. He was tired, folks. He's also stubborn and righteous. I mean, all three viewers described him that way. And he was emotionally burdened, but he was resolute. Now, Aziz was detecting anger and isolation, a loose cannon quality, and an independent will unmanaged by external control systems. This is deep stuff, folks. You're talking about this is deeper psychology than you ever get with someone like Freud or Jung. And so Intisam in her session confirms a belief-based resilience, but also external influence from an elite inner circle. And she also picked up some extraterrestrial manipulation threads involved in this. We're talking about the Iranian leadership right now. Now, Kamaya's data, she was echoing this, and she was talking about external, non-human thought projection, reinforcing domination and control impulses. Eesh. All right. Let's talk about a sort of a psychological synthesis now of all of this. Ali Khamenei, the supreme religious leader of Iran, he emerges as a leader driven by destiny. A leader driven by destiny. That's how he feels of himself. He feels both watched and alone. It's a dangerous combination for someone who's overseeing world-altering hardware, such as the nuclear bomb type stuff. But unlike many world figures described as puppets, Ali Khamenei appears unleashed and uncompromised, commanding on belief rather than manipulation. That's huge. That's huge, folks. To have that psychological portrayal of the supreme religious leader of Iran is huge. It's hugely important. I can't emphasize it enough. All right, so let's now talk about emotions, the emotional atmosphere. We might call this a sacred machine. Well, at first we have this concept of collective devotion. personnel within these facilities, these nuclear facilities, they treat the technology in Iran with reverence. Now, Aziz, when he was perceiving them, he likened it to parents hovering over an egg. Do you get that idea? Like this technology is like really important to them, and parents hovering over an egg, a living offspring of the nation's pride. Now, the emotional field blends with national identity and sort of also a spiritual destiny, making the program more than just science. It's a symbol of divine resilience against foreign control. Now let's talk about the ET intervention, the extraterrestrial intervention threads. Now both Intisam and Kamaya detected non-human influence around the leadership of Iran and the scientific hierarchy as well, guiding or distorting perceptions. Now, whether these are energetic manipulations or psychological projections, the implication is that Iran's nuclear ambition has metaphysical sponsorship, for better or for worse. Now, let's talk about the strategic implications for this presentation that we're talking about right now. What kind of narrative can we draw in terms of strategy? Well, the Nuclear Capabilities Project acts as the buried heart beneath the earlier three-phase conflict sequence. Northern Lebanon, Hamas, and then, Iran and stuff like that. So this Nuclear Capabilities Project acts like the buried heart. It's the core of the earlier conventional fighting stuff. Phase 1 of the sequence. Pressure. While Iran is outwardly defensive, underground systems advance quietly toward readiness. Phase 2. Incursion. As the foreign strikes intensify, these hidden assets, these nuclear assets, become both deterrent and spiritual justification to the Iranians. Phase 3. Fury. Once the leadership's emotional threshold breaks, the sacred machine could transition from deterrent to deployment. We have to realize that this is a possibility. This is a possibility, especially if Iran feels it's an existential threat. So in emotional terms, the nuclear infrastructure is not merely a weapon. It's the embodiment of Iranian sovereignty and cosmic validation. Any direct assault on it is likely to be perceived as an attack on identity itself, ensuring escalation beyond the conventional limits. And that is why we think that the war could extend into the continental United States. So let's sort of wrap it up by talking about how to add this to the overall picture. Beneath the visible wars in Gaza, Lebanon, and also Syria lies another battlefield, deep under the mountains of Iran. Here within layered halls of metal and prayer, engineers guard what they see as the nation's divine inheritance. That's how they look at the Iranian nuclear program. Their leader, Ali Khamenei, he's weary, but trust me on this, these remote viewing sessions are absolutely clear on this. Ali Khamenei, he may be weary, but he is unyielding. He believes this hidden power is both the shield and the destiny. The remote viewing data suggests a readiness held in reserve, a sleeping weapon entwined with faith itself. That's how they see it. And whether it awakens will depend not on the calendar and specific dates, but on one man's conviction and the pressures that are closing around him. Friends, you don't get anything close to this in the mainstream news, in any news outlet. You don't get anything close to this anywhere. But our remote viewing sessions have been extraordinarily accurate, and we published those before the 12-Day War. And, of course, they include the stuff that's coming when the 12-Day War expands into the full thing. But the whole war, again, is both the combination of the 12-Day War and the war that's coming after. That's all one thing with a pause in the middle. And right now we've been in the pause in the middle. But the second half of that war is about to start. Folks, this is deep stuff. And the real question is, do we want to look at the truth? Do we want to look at actual stuff that happens? Yeah, we want to see it clear as day. That's why I always say when you hear people talk about just feel good vibrations, things like that, it's like, what? Let's look at reality and then envision where we want to go. Yes. You want to have a positive future. Yes. But you don't do it by ignoring the present. That's what a lot of the channeling community says. Don't think about anything negative. Just feel good vibrations, and it's all okay. While they slowly cement you into the trap, seal the doors, and make you a prisoner for thousands of years. No. See the reality and then clearly envision where you want to be. You were never created a creature in this universe so that you could be blind. You're supposed to see. And one of the things that is the most powerful for creating a new future is clearly seeing where you are in the present. And that's what the prison authorities do not want you to see. They don't want you to see what's real now, because then you would do something to change that and to have a better future by seeing the reality as it actually is. You can create a better future. So today's talk on Spotlight was to give a more clear understanding of where this war in the Middle East is going. We're not done with it. The 12-Day War is not over. It's just been paused and it's going to restart. So the entire Middle Eastern conflict, this is the exact right moment to talk about it, because now you get to see the entire thing. And it's so good that our sessions were done before the 12-Day War, so you could actually see how accurate we were in description of everything that happened before. So thus you have a good idea that the level of accuracy that we have will be continued as the war continues. Let's just watch and let's just see and let's just learn. Keep your eyes open, folks. Don't believe anybody that tells you just feel good vibrations. Learn. Keep your eyes open. Trust the data. I see you next week, folks. You've been a great audience. We had a great turnout today also. And I will see you next Sunday. It's a big day. It's a big time next Sunday. And I'm so excited to tell you some of the new stuff that's coming out, because it's not just new content coming out, but new ways of delivering that content to show you. You're going to be, once we actually get it in front of your eyes, you're going to be like, whoa, so this is what they've been working on. Anyway, please sign up for FarsightPrime.com to watch us, to watch everything we do. You don't get that anywhere else. So here's where you get it. Love you, folks. And I will see you all next week at the next Spotlight on Sunday. See you then.